I don't usually take the late-night bus. But that night, it was my only option. It was past 1 a.m., and the streets were empty. The bus station lights flickered like they hadn't been changed in years. When the bus finally arrived, I was the only one waiting. I climbed inside. The driver didn't even look at me, just nodded, his face hidden under the shadow of his cap. His hands were pale, long fingers gripping the wheel too tightly. I dropped my coins into the box and sat near the middle. At first, nothing seemed strange. The bus groaned and rattled as it pulled away from the station, the sound echoing through the hollow, empty interior. But then, I noticed something in the mirrors. The long mirror above the windshield that lets the driver see the whole bus showed more than just me. There was another passenger. A man. Sitting 3 rows behind me, but when I turned around to look, the seats were empty. I laughed nervously. Maybe the reflection was warped. Maybe I was just tired. But when I looked again, he was still there. Closer. 2 rows behind me now. I spun around again, nothing. Just the empty seats and the dim flickering lights. My chest tightened. I tried to calm myself, pulling out my phone. No signal. Of course, I told myself, don't look at the mirror again. But you know how the human brain works. I glanced up. This time, the man was sitting directly behind me. I froze. My throat went dry, slowly. I turned my head. The seat was empty. But before I could even breathe, I felt it. A hand. Cold. Resting gently on my shoulder, I shot out of my seat, stumbling down the aisle. "Stop the bus!" I shouted. I ran to the driver, shaking his arm. His head turned slowly, and in the dim light I saw his face for the first time. His skin looked stretched. His eyes were clouded, white and empty. And then he spoke. His voice cracked and dry. "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled back, heart racing. The bus was speeding now, faster and faster. Outside the windows, there was nothing. Just blackness. I turned to run for the back door. But the seats were no longer empty. Every row, every seat, was filled. Dozens of pale, silent passengers staring forward, their faces blank, lifeless, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Finally, I turned back to the mirror, and I saw myself. Not sitting in the aisle. I was sitting in one of the seats. My head tilted to the side, my skin pale, my eyes blank, like the rest of them. The driver turned his head one last time. "You're home now." The bus slowed, the rattling fading into a low hum. I didn't try to move. I didn't want to. A strange calm washed over me as I stared at my own empty reflection. The bus hissed to a stop, the doors folding open. Outside, a single figure stood waiting under a flickering light. The driver didn't look at her, just nodded, his face hidden under the shadow of his cap. The bus doors hissed open, and I stepped on without a second thought. It had been a long shift, and my feet ached. The bus was surprisingly full for this time of night, every seat taken but one. I paid my fare to the driver, who just grunted, his face a mystery under his cap. I squeezed down the narrow aisle, the other passengers as still as statues. They didn't look up as I passed. I sank into the only empty seat, next to a young man staring out the window. "Long night," I said, trying to be friendly. He didn't answer. I sighed and leaned my head back. That's when I noticed it. The silence. Not just a lack of talking, but a total absence of sound. No shuffling feet, no coughs, no rustling bags. The only noise was the groan of the bus engine. I looked around. No one was moving. At all. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I looked at the man beside me again. His skin was waxy, his eyes fixed on the dark glass. He wasn't blinking. I leaned in slightly, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. "Hey," I whispered. "Are you okay?" Slowly, so slowly, his head turned. The movement was stiff, unnatural. He looked at me, and his eyes, they were clouded over, a milky white. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves scraping pavement. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the window. I need to get off," I stammered, fumbling for the stop request button. I pressed it again and again, but there was no bell, no light. The bus just picked up speed, the city lights outside blurring into streaks of color. "It won't stop," Jonas whispered. "Not for you." I looked from his terrifying face to the driver's mirror. The driver was watching me. His eyes weren't white like the others. They glowed with a faint, hungry light. Then, in perfect, chilling unison, every other passenger on the bus turned their head to look at me. Dozens of pairs of milky white eyes, all fixed on me. The silence was broken by a collective, sighing whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "There's only one way off," Jonas said, his voice laced with terrible sadness. "Someone has to take your place." The bus began to slow, the engine's groan fading. Outside the window, the blur resolved into a single, flickering street lamp. A bus stop, a lone figure stood waiting in the gloom. A man, huddled in a coat. The bus hissed to a stop, the doors folding open with a soft invitation. "It's him, or you," Jonas whispered. I looked at the waiting man. Then at the rows of empty eyes watching me. And I made my choice. I raised a hand and waved to the man outside, beckoning him on. He smiled gratefully and climbed the steps. As he dropped his coins in the box, I felt a coldness seep into my bones, a heavy calm settling over me. I leaned my head back against the seat, the doors closed, and the bus pulled away. The new passenger looked around for a seat, his eyes landing on me. "Long night," he said, offering a tired smile. I turned my head to look at him, the movement stiff and slow. I didn't answer. I just stared, my eyes as white and empty as the road ahead. The bus groaned to the curb, its metal skin slick with a grime that seemed to swallow the streetlight. It wasn't my usual route, but my feet were screaming after a double shift, and it was heading in the right direction. I climbed aboard, the air thick and cloying, like a forgotten tomb. The driver was a silhouette, a void in a uniform, who took my fare without a word. I found the only empty seat, a sticky vinyl bench near the back. The other passengers were a gallery of wax figures, their heads lolling at odd angles, their clothes dated. A faint, sweet smell, like rotting flowers, hung in the air. I sat next to a young man, his gaze fixed on the grimy window. His knuckles were white where he gripped the seat in front of him. The bus lurched forward, but there was no sound of the engine. Only a low, rhythmic hum that vibrated through the floor, through my bones. I looked around. No one coughed. No one blinked. The only movement was the gentle sway of a woman's head in the front, her neck clearly broken, keeping time with the hum of the bus. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in my chest. I turned to the man beside me. "What's going on?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't look at me, but his lips barely moved. "It's feeding," he breathed, his voice a dry rustle. "It's always feeding, what is?" I asked, my voice cracking. Slowly, he turned his head, a sickening, grinding sound coming from his neck. He faced me, and I saw his eyes. They weren't just white. They were empty sockets, hollowed out and dark, yet from their depths, a faint, silver light pulsed in time with the bus's hum. I recoiled, a scream trapped in my throat. I lunged for the aisle, scrambling for the stop request cord. I pulled it, again and again. The plastic cord came away in my hand, sticky and warm. The bus didn't slow. It plunged deeper into the night, the city lights vanishing behind us. "It won't stop," Jonas's voice echoed in my head. "The driver takes us where it wants to go." I looked up at the long rearview mirror. The driver's face was visible now. It was a smooth, pale mask with no features, no eyes, no mouth. Just a blank, terrifying expanse of skin. A collective groan filled the bus. In unison, all the passengers began to stir. They didn't just turn their heads, their bodies contorted, limbs stretching and twisting. They began to crawl over the seats, their movements like spiders, their empty sockets fixed on me. They were coming for me. "There's only one price for a ticket off this bus," Jonas rasped as the crawling figures closed in. "A new light for the collection." The bus began to slow, pulling up not to a bus stop, but to a stalled car on the side of a desolate road. A young family stood beside it, the father waving his arms for help. The bus doors hissed open. "One of them," Jonas whispered, his meaning horribly clear. "Choose one to take your place. Or they will take you apart, piece by piece." The crawling passengers paused, waiting. I looked at the hopeful face of the father, the worried mother clutching her child. I couldn't do it. I couldn't condemn one of them. "No," I sobbed. As the word left my lips, the crawling passengers surged forward. Hands, cold and strong, grabbed my arms, my legs. They dragged me down the aisle, towards the featureless driver. The driver's blank face turned towards me. A thin slit opened where a mouth should be, and the humming intensified. The last thing I saw was Jonas, a fresh tear leaking from one of his empty eyes. Then, a blinding, silver light erupted from the driver's mouth, and I felt my own eyes burn away, my consciousness dissolving into the hungry, humming dark. The bus drove on, its collection fed, leaving a stranded family safe in the night.